Tonight on The Breakdown, 1 week in and it's already knockout time for the Aussies in Super Rugby Trans-Tasman. We try to find a silver lining to the Silver Lake saga. And Bulavanaka and Malo Ilele, there's a festival of Pacific rugby coming your way.
Kia ora koutou katoa malo, lele, talofa, bula, hello and welcome to The Breakdown. Yes, the Super Rugby Trans-Tasman rivalry kicked off over the weekend. We saw the Kiwi sides go 5-0, but not without an ounce of luck. If you thought some of the action on the field was ferocious, spare a thought for the next mediator in the NZR versus NZRPA discussion. I'm volunteering Sir John Kerwin-Mills, and back on The Breakdown for the first time in 2021, and maybe not even last year because of the pandemic, former Blackfern Hannah Porter joins us. Thanks, welcome along. We've got Ricky Sornell coming on a little bit later. When I picked up the phone on Saturday, you didn't think this is the sort of things we'll be discussing tonight, right?
No, the Silver Lake deal, I wasn't really keen to jump into the middle of that.
That's why we keep things low. We've got JK to cover us. But look, JK's smiling. We'll get about that. We can discuss that in the middle part. But there's a reason you're smiling.
Oh, how good is the scoreboard at the moment?
What scoreboard?
The Blues are winning.
Well, they've had one game.
It's irrelevant.
What do you mean it's irrelevant? You say that all the time.
How good were they?
Oh.
Did you read the media, Mills?
No.
Oh, back to their best.
Are they? Hey? Oh, nice.
Oh, Mills, you've been in the wars over the weekend, though. The Rebels were in the wars in Melbourne. You were in the wars. Just run a bit of a close-up here, a little bit close-up. Just run between the eyebrows there. What's happened? What's going on?
You're not ideal, and a lot of first-time hunters relate to this. I scoped myself, so when I went to pull the trigger, it accidentally came back. Accidentally, I should say, and... damn it.
That's why we have makeup in the show. Yeah. That's how it works. Look, I need some allegiances from you after the weekend. The Chiefs, the Blues, you've been known to flip-flop from time to time. Performances, you look at it. First weekend of Trans-Tasman, what did you think?
I was a bit disappointed with the intensity, really. I thought the Australians might have brought a bit more. I know, you know, obviously there's two close games, one in Christchurch and one in Perth, but you know, having watched the Australians and getting a gauge about where they were, I think this was our first opportunity to really get that. I was a little bit disappointed with the intensity they actually brought to the games.
And you think about it, though, 4 teams didn't have that opportunity to recover from a final. You think about the performances of the teams. The Reds went to Dunedin and struggled. The Brumbies almost stole one against the Crusaders, or stole a draw, and then the Chiefs struggled. I mean, that was never going to be an easy task for any of those teams.
No, and I suppose the team I feel the sorriest for is the Chiefs that had to do a day of travel and back up in Perth, which would have been a tough...
It's a tough challenge,
end,
right?
yeah.
In the last 20 minutes, JK, of any game, and I think you saw the Crusaders in particular, when they took Richie Mo'unga off, it was a different story. The Reds, I was surprised down in Dunedin. There was a number of guys that he didn't select. They lost O'Connor through injury. So the challenge is, though, right, this weekend, it's almost like a knockout round for the Australian teams because they didn't get a win. You're not going to make the final of this competition winning 3 games.
Well, I'm sort of hoping that the Aussie side's a bit like the last Joseph Parker fight. 6 rounds, you know. First round, get used to the intensity, Mills. They're playing a different style of football, or I reckon is the future of their game. Reminds me of the 80s where they played a little bit more of a fluid game. So I'm hoping that the intensity of the first week and this week will see a step up in that intensity. You don't probably believe that, but I think that that's hopefully what will happen, because if it doesn't, we said that we need the Australian sides to be strong and we need the national side to be strong, and they do need to start playing a different style of footy.
You were looking at me like there was an element of disgust, but it was more about the fact I've got to go and show you the table. That's what I was leading to, is the fact that let's put it up. Let's put it up for JK, and there it is. The Blues are 1 from 1, a plus-minus of 47. They got a bonus point. The Highlanders...
That's important.
And there are a number of important things we need to talk about here. We talked about bonus points being absolutely critical. Allegiances, let's talk of those. You come on the show, Hannah. I hope you're an asset to me. The fact you look at the Highlanders there, to get that bonus point against the Reds, that was pretty important in the context of their season. Yeah,
really important. And I will back the Highlanders, actually, from my time in Dunedin. I'd like to see them go well in this competition.
Did you like what you see from them? Even against this Reds side who, look, they got off to a fast start. 12,000 plus was graduation down in Dunedin, but in the nature, there's some young guys that got opportunities. I thought they played pretty well.
Yeah, I thought they played really well, tactically in the first half, and again, Aaron Smith, just the master of controlling the tempo of the game and finding people in space.
hangover from the final for me for the Reds. Not the hangover of actually celebrating the final. They struggled with the intensity for 4 weeks just trying to make the final. I think we saw a little bit of taking nothing away from the Highlanders. When I get back to this argument, I think next round is actually the real round.
Yep. The Brumbies go to Hamilton and play the Chiefs.
Well, the Chiefs
play
at
the
midnight.
Blues in Auckland. But they might get home. But I look at that and I go, I really was impressed with the Brumbies, Mills. The fact that, look, given the challenge of the fact, the disappointment of not getting the result done in Australia against the Reds, I thought they showed some enterprise, and in some way I thought they were well and truly the best Australian team on show on the weekend.
Oh, they certainly do. They showed a lot of grit, and even in this try here, when they came back right from their own 22 off the kick-off, I think it was, and the fight back that they showed. Outstanding, and you're right. No, I totally agree with the fact they were the best Australian team. The one worry I do have, JK, in your comment, the fact that I hope that they adapt. Traditionally, New Zealand teams are the ones that adapt the quickest, and so when you look at round 2, are we going to see a bigger blow? We don't really need a bigger blow in terms of where we sit with the Australians, but I think the worrying signs are that New Zealand teams tend to adapt faster than the Aussies.
Talk about adapting. I've got a bone to pick. A real bone to pick, and it's the scrums. In the first 20 minutes of that game in Christchurch, between the Brumbies and the Crusaders, there was 5 minutes of ball and play. I want to know, when did the scrum become such an integral part of the game? The fact that it used to be a restart of play, an opportunity hand to actually launch an attack. Is it a frustrating part of the game right now? Is it a blight on the game? And is something that needs to be addressed? Because this is what every other player across the game is looking at and seeing. Do we need to find a solution to speed the game up in this part of the game?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right, going back to the launching of the attack and how important that is, and keeps people watching the game, the exciting part of it, rather than sitting looking at scrums.
And I remember
I've got the solution.
You've got a solution. You've always got a solution. But I just want to say this, JK, I remember when we were playing, the fact that, and you were part of some fantastic forward packs with Auckland, you used it as a weapon in terms of manipulating the defence to turn an angle, and you didn't scrum for penalties. The fact it wasn't about the scoreboard, it was about creating opportunities. Conversely, when you're on defence, you did the same thing. You may have had a dominant scrum, but it didn't dominate the game.
Same with the All Blacks. We scrum to launch an attack. But the interesting thing, and I'll come back to it, Doc Mayhew presented to the 2003 World Game and said, we're actually resetting the scrum for safety, but you're doubling the risk. And he mentioned at the time, if you have 16 guys on the ground, how good is that for the backs? So why are we resetting? If it's a penalty that way, it's just play on. 16 guys on the ground. Second thing, you're not resetting and doubling the risk. The third thing is the players will then start to self-regulate. So you imagine if you're Richie McCaw, he's going to say to the players, you keep the scrum up, otherwise I'm not going to make it to the first 5. So those simple things would change the game. We can't watch the first 20 minutes of the Brumbies Crusaders and have 5 minutes of rugby if we want to get new people to the game. Right. We don't, I mean, I love you props. Well, not really, but we want to see the backs.
Well, no, what I want to see is I want to see props have enough juice in the tank to carry the ball, to clean out rucks, to get themselves involved in the game, rather than going into it and their focus, Mills, about scrummaging.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think we can't lose that sort of that scrummaging mentality. I think we still need it in the game. So getting rid of it, I don't think is the outcome. I think what they need to try and understand, you've seen in those clips, is what the referees are actually looking at in terms of what they're penalising, and actually give yellow cards to speed that up, because that's where you're going to get parity. If a team is dominating and they're getting parity and there's a yellow card, well, someone else has to come on. Well, then if it's constant sort of penalties, then isn't that where you get parity and then we're not having resetting?
But Mills, if you're talking about domination, right? So let's say the other day the Blues, right? They're pushing the opposition off the ball. It should just be play on, not a penalty. Because you're going forward, they're going backward. The loose forwards can't get off the scrum. Then you've got backs against backs. Like, this penalties all the time, I don't think's the solution, right? So how do we get dominance without depowering the scrum? I agree with that. We want players to be able to play the game.
Isn't it a goal line dropout, which we've got now, normal dropouts, kick-offs, line-outs, restarts of play? This is one of the few aspects where the initial part is pure and simply about the contest up front. Yeah, and that surely is not a positive aspect of the game we're looking for. I mean, we've tried free kicks, it didn't work. I mean, is there a way you think that we can, like you say, take the pressure off the referees? Is that easy?
Oh, I don't know. I certainly don't have the answer. I find it ironic that it's 4 outside backs chatting about scrums, to be honest, Jeff.
Well, because we want the ball, right?
Yeah.
We want to play.
How often did Caleb Clark touch the ball this season?
And not enough. And what did he do? I mean, didn't get the confidence he wanted. I want to ask this, though, Hen, can you explain to me a 64-48 game of footy? What does that look like? You know, the Hurricanes and the Waratahs. It was bizarre to me to see a New Zealand team not score 64 points, but concede 48. Do you think in their camp they're looking at that as a win or a loss?
No, I don't imagine the Monday morning review was that enjoyable for either team, to be honest. Kind of senseless penalties and a lack of defence would sum it up for me.
Good news that Ruben Love looks as though he's only suffered a concussion. I'm wondering whether or not they saw that in the first 3 minutes, Mills, and decided, you know what, let's have a game of touch for the rest of it, because it may have looked as though there was some positive play. In saying that, I'd rather see that than the scrumming battle I got in Christchurch. I've got to be selective. You
should be happy, Goldie, because that was the first 2 years of Super Rugby when you were playing. That's what it was. Didn't have a lot of defence, had a lot of attack. It was fantastic football. I don't have a problem with that.
That game almost thought me about making a comeback. If we were allowed to play like that, I'd be keen. I'm available.
I think what we're getting back to, though, is actually what does the crowd want to see and what do new supporters want to see? Because sometimes as purists, and you're right, Hannah, all my scrum mates will be saying, JK, what are you talking about, depowering the scrums? But we've got some challenges in our game. We're not attracting new people. You know, we're not getting new other people coming across from viewers to watch our sport. So how are we going to make it to keep a bit of the old school stuff, but also make it entertainment?
Yeah, but I think to me it's the fact that when it becomes a contest, and to me that doesn't become a contest until you leave school. Schoolboys, you watch schoolboy rugby, high school rugby, their scrums are outstanding because they want to play. They don't worry about pushing over, and they don't push further than a metre anyway, and we get some outstanding form. Great news, as always, around the world. Plenty to talk about. It's time for us to go swanning with Ricky.
Swanning. Hi, everyone. How are you going?
I'm great.
Good start. Right, let's get into it. Let's head first to Japan, where Kieran Reid has announced his retirement after his Toyota club lost to Panasonic in the semi-finals of Japan's top league. Reid won 2 World Cups with the All Blacks. He played 127 tests, 52 of those as captain, toss in 4 Super Rugby titles, and that is a very, very handy career. The final of the top league will see Panasonic and Japan's 2019 World Cup star Kenki Fukuoka taking on Bowden Barrett Suntory in Sunday's final. Across the Pacific Ocean, and another former All Black, Ma'anonu, is tipped to rejoin the San Diego Legion as a player coach after his stint with Toulon in the French top 14 finishes. The double World Cup winner played 4 games for San Diego in Major League last year. And why wouldn't you? Because if you stay at the MLR, you might get a chance to play here. The LA Guillotines will play the first ever rugby match at SoFi Stadium in LA. This is a 70,000 plus seat stadium, reportedly the world's most expensive, with a $5.5 billion with a B price tag. The Guillotines, will play the Utah Warriors this weekend. You'd be hoping you'd actually get a little guillotine while you're sitting up in the stands to have a drink. The British and Irish Lions tour to South Africa has been trimmed. They will now play 8 matches in 3 cities rather than 6. These changes are all aimed at reducing the risk of disruption caused by COVID. Of course, the games at this stage will be played without spectators. But team, I think we would agree, big news out of the weekend or the last week or so, the retirement of Kieran Reid, an absolute legend of the game. Where does he stack up?
Where does he stack up for you? In terms of our great All Blacks and great leaders, think about his record and the success he's had.
And an almost understated leader. He had a thankless task in following Richie McCaw as captain of the All Blacks, right? And funnily enough, we will have in the coming weeks a thing here on Breakdown where a few of us have picked our greatest All Blacks 15s. I will say Kieran Reid wasn't my #1 pick for number 8, but he was certainly in the conversation.
None of us will be offended.
I'm not saying. I'm not saying a word. Look, you were part of
the panel, so you'll get plenty of scrutiny.
I might never be invited back to the show.
And just your impact on the fact that the career you think Kieran Reid has had and his impact on New Zealand rugby.
Yeah, a quiet leader, and as Ricky said, coming off the back of Richie's kind of leadership style, I think he's managed to put a good leadership team around him, which is still there now in the All Blacks, I think, which is really powerful.
And he's done a good job of harbouring that, Mills. You think about the man himself, went through some challenges, some serious injuries, but put everything he possibly could into every jersey he played for.
Yeah, fairly quiet, but worked really hard. And it's always hard when, you know, you're picking sort of the greatest in that position. If you look at Rito, very well liked by, you know, all his peers, you know, as a leader in terms of what he, you know, how he acted and how he treated guys. But also, I think if you look at the game and what he changed, you know, getting out wide, you know, was, you know, particularly when the game changed a little bit, and him getting him out wide and running the ball and his skill set out there, and then coming back in and doing the close quarter stuff. I think that was really impressive to me about you know, his play on the field, JK.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I think one of our absolute greats. I think following, like, it took a few years for Zinni to come out of Buck Shelford's shadow. And I think number 8's one of those ones where everyone's got their favourite, you know. It's a bit like halfback. It's one of those positions very difficult. But 127 times for the All Black, 2 World Cups. I mean, his record speaks for itself. And at the end of the day, when you're old like us, you look back on your career, that's what speaks. It speaks about what you've won, how many times you've played, how you acted as a human being. So I think you'll go down as one of the greats. And everyone will always debate who's better. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty good conversation to be in. Who are the best 3 or 4 All Black number 8s ever? And he'll be in there.
Absolutely. And let's go from one great All Black to another. Has someone written that on there for me? Because Andrew Mertens has obviously hacked the system. We'll go across to him in Australia, Mertz. Yeah, there he is. Are you hacking the system again, one great All Black to another? Welcome to the show. It's always great to chat to you. Rumour was you picked a couple of teams, a couple of Australian teams, to maybe win in the first round. Mate, give us your thoughts. Were you surprised they didn't manage to pull one off?
Well, considering, good evening all. I sent you that lead in, by the way, mate, so there you go. Yeah, I think when you look at the 2 really, really close ones, you've got to think, gee, they were all but. I actually picked the Force. I had a little bet with Marshy that the Force might tip up the Chiefs. I thought it was a really hard one for the Chiefs, you know, after the final, coming off the final, having to go all the way over to Perth, meeting a fired-up Force team. And they've been in the position before the Force in the Super Rugby AU where they've just had to absorb pressure and they somehow stay in the fight. And quite extraordinary, the extra height they grow and speed they grow towards the end of the game. That bloke there, Domingo Miotti, got across the line and did me no favours with my bet with Marshy by missing that kick. He hasn't missed a thing all year. But so, you know, that was obviously pretty close. I was trying really hard to keep believing on behalf of Aussies. I don't want to see New Zealand teams beaten, but I want to see a good competition, guys, as we all do. And so, you know, I was genuinely hopeful there would be some really close games, a couple of blowouts, and a lot of points scored in that other game that wasn't the tight one, the Hurricanes against the Waratahs. And I don't think the Hurricanes will be overly happy with their defensive performance, but, you know, it was enough to give encouragement to Australians to keep watching and keep hoping and hopefully subscribe to Stan Sport over here.
Mertz, see your beautiful face on Stan Sports, mate. Hey, we've sort of been watching it and it looks like the Australians are trying to play their own style rather than follow the Southern Hemisphere, getting back to a little bit of what I would call 80s rugby. And I think it's been good for Super Rugby AU for them to play against themselves. Is that the case? Is Dave Rennie trying to put some sort of influence across people? And do you think it might be working and they need a week to sort of settle in?
Well, I think, I mean, we know Dave Rennie's no mug. You've got to play to what strengths you have and what resources you have. And, you know, I don't think there's any point the Australians just trying to play the New Zealand style of rugby because I think on a basic level, they don't have the skills. In terms of depth, they do not have the skills. They, you know, have some amazing commitment and passion. They're sometimes the Australian team's more comfortable playing without the ball than with it. So they don't have the skills to be able to carry off the phase after phase that the New Zealand teams do. But they don't want to get caught into the trap of trying to play that style of rugby because it isn't their strength. So, you know, their job's to mix it up and be gritty, frustrate teams and then take their opportunities when they can, if and when they can. I mean, this was a great example. The Rebels have struggled putting attack together all year and they really didn't threaten the Blues. And you know, while the Blues did it tough in the first half, as soon as they got on the front foot and got more and more pill in the second half, they just showed what New Zealand rugby's about. But I was saying, look, it's not going to be a foregone conclusion constantly because it is a different style of rugby. And for the New Zealand teams, they've got to adjust perhaps to slightly messier and a slightly grittier kind of rugby at times. So, it's just whatever works best for you. And like I say, I don't think the Australian teams, they did seem to attack a little bit more than they had been, particularly the Waratahs seemed to enjoy the freedom of playing against the New Zealand team rather than a stifling defence. So, there were some steps forward they made, but it's not going to be their strength, certainly not over the next 5 or 6 weeks. You can't rectify that difference in skill level. So they've got to play their own game.
It's one of the strengths in New Zealand rugby is obviously the physicality, and it's interesting. I heard on one of your pre-match games, the pre-match shows that Stan Sport, Czech said that the Aussie teams need to surprise the New Zealand teams in terms of that physicality. I mean, do you see that happening? Can you see the Australian teams adjusting to that physical nature of the game?
Yeah, well, it's, Millsy, that I'm not the right guy to be talking to about physicality, of course, but I think it's a different sort of a physical that they have. It's not always the out-and-out raw power that we perhaps see in the New Zealand game at times, but it's more a smarter delivered gang tackle kind of a physicality, because they've always been really good at identifying runners and making a decision on the right runner and ganging 2 or 3 defenders up. So they make some really good gang tackles. And I think that's the physicality and I guess trying to be a pain at the breakdown as well. And that combines obviously with trying to get a little bit of front foot when you're on defence, try and get those multiple guys and making a tackle go forward and require a New Zealand team to commit more to the breakdown, because you guys know what New Zealand teams want to do. They want to commit 1, maybe 2 at the most, and just get that quick ball, and an Aaron Smith or a Brad Weber or whatever just fires it out and away they go. So, the Australians need to be able to counter that. And so I guess that's the physicality that you're talking about. But they do have, in the midfield particularly, and in the hookers across the Super Rugby AU, they did have some very, very physical players, particularly the likes of, the Brumbies, Samoa and Ikito. Paisami's not playing yet for the Reds again, but he's been devastating this year, kind of like a Ngani Laumape sort of a player. So, there is some physicality throughout, but I think they need to deliver it smart on their defence.
Sorry, I was taking a drink. I was just getting my breath back. I was just thinking they were going to put you at the end of the show. I said, there's no chance we're going to put Andrew Mertens at the end of the show. You've got the full rundown right there. We had more questions. I knew that would be a waste of time, mate. Outstanding. Take a breath, sit down.
No matter where you put me in the show, it will be at the end, because I'll get it to the end. There you go. 20 minutes.
Cut him off. Cut him off. You're done. Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure. See you, buddy. Oh, Ricky, yeah, you've been standing there for about 3 minutes. Come on in.
I thought I might actually send him over the trivia question. He could have done that as well.
Oh, outstanding.
But what great analysis too. And what about his passion for the Aussie teams, eh? In the Sydney side,
They're paying the bills.
Exactly.
Exactly right. All right, trivia question. I think Mills dropped the mic on the answer last week, nailed it. I don't think any of you got a show, but I'm going to ask it anyway, this question. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about the All Blacks schedule coming up, the Pacifica Festival of Rugby, but the All Blacks will play Tonga at Mount Smart Stadium in July.
What is the go?
We'll get to that. Save it. That's not the question.
Concentrate on.
Is that not the question?
No, we're going to concentrate on the question. The trivia question. What's the deal with that? Send your answers into the breakdown. Send your answers to New Zealand Rugby. No, the trivia question. The All Blacks will play Tonga at Mount Smart Stadium. They have played at the All Blacks, that is, have played at 4 other venues in Auckland. Name them. 4 tests. Oh, I just got yelled at. 4 tests. They've played 4 tests at other venues in Auckland.
All right, let's go.
Name them. All right.
Pins up.
You guys get to that one. Of course, stay with us on the breakdown, and you're probably going to steel yourself, get a cup of tea, get ready, because we're going there. Silver Lake after the break.
Now it's away down to Marshall. Wilson. Easy for Jack Wilson. Marshall. Mertens. Away. Wilson pops up on the other side and gets it. Goal line is right there. Freed away Stetsness to Wilson. Here's another one. 3 to Jack Wilson. Right at halfway, they've got it once more. Mertens. Stetsness to Bunce. Pops it back in field. Mertens in a big gap. Fitzpatrick is there, but he sets that Wilson is wide, and Wilson's going to Wilson and get another one. Jack Wilson. Mertens. Stetsness to Wilson. Number 5 coming up for Jack Wilson. Well, Jeff Wilson benefit though.
Welcome back to the breakdown. We finished on the trivia question. It's got the team stumped this week, so they're all going to have a crack. So the question was, the All Blacks will play Tonga at Mount Smart Stadium later this year. They have played tests at 4 other venues in Auckland. Name them.
I banked Eden Park. So that's...
So we've bagged Eden Park.
Yeah, 1 for 1.
Albany.
When we've bagged Albany North Harbour Stadium, which leaves Hannah and JK with the short straws. Hannah?
Yeah, I've gone a bit fringe with Western Springs.
Good thinking, but no.
In 1932, the All Blacks played Australia at the Auckland Domain. The score was 9-6.
You know what? You're wrong. But you're not actually that wrong.
Oh, really?
You're wrong, but you're not that
You're
wrong.
going to make it up. Be really convincing.
Okay.
Exactly.
So here it is. So Eden Park in North Harbour, obviously. Potters Park against the British Isles in 1908. And the Epsom Showgrounds against Australia in 1958. So Potters Park is, for those who know Auckland and the area, is the one as you're heading around Balmoral by the KFC. And around that Mount Eden Sandringham area, that's Potters Park.
That's your point of contact, is the KFC.
No, well, it's because...
I mean, that's KFC there. How many KFCs are there in Auckland?
But by most rugby fields.
It's on my drive to Eden Park, so I'm like, there's Potters Park, where they played the British Isles in 1908.
I must say that footage before the break, which I didn't put together, but there's 20 minutes to go in that game. I had 5, and Mark Ellis held the record for 6 tries in a test match. He was at the game yelling from the stands for everyone to stop kicking, passing, or giving me any involvement in the game. So
and they did.
And they did. Which knew exactly who they liked more, and I totally agree with them. The fact that, you know...
5 in a test match, that's a good effort though, mate.
What's that? To be fair, I didn't. It was a great crowd. It was a great occasion. Actually, really enjoyed it. I was playing against Manasseh Mbari, and I played with the Highlanders. Yeah, good player. Yeah. He was very kind.
We will get more to the Pacific Rugby Festival coming up a little bit later, but big deep breath, everybody, because we're going to change the tone somewhat. New Zealand Rugby's move to sell 12.5% of its future income to the US fund manager Silver Lake remains at a very messy impasse after things turned, well, frankly, a bit feral over the weekend. The Players Association told media before it told New Zealand Rugby about its alternative option of selling a 5% share through a stock exchange listing. That saw NZR boss Mark Robinson react pretty angrily. He was shocked and disappointed that the NZRPA was trying to effectively destroy the Silver Lake deal. They wheeled out some big guns too. Richie McCaw, who is great mates with the Players Association boss Rob Nichol, has broken his silence. He says he wants to see reasoned debate about the 2 options. And Conrad Smith, who works for the International Players Association, also backed his old skipper's call for greater debate around the 2 options. But it seems very personal at the top from what the public insults, and there seems to be a very significant standoff between Rob Nichol, who is with the Players Association, of course, and the chairman of New Zealand Rugby, Brent Impey. So the question is, if they're going to head back to mediation, will anything actually be resolved by some of these key protagonists? They either need to back down or step aside.
And that's the
I'm lobbing that in, and I'm
You're lobbing it in, you're throwing in the grenade and going...
That's the question.
It's one of the things, I'm sure we'd like to be talking about something different. Like to be talking about progress and things that aren't necessarily, I suppose, maybe having a negative impact on the game. Talking about this conversation. How important is it these 2 parties, they find a way to get together in the boardroom again, and maybe sooner rather than later?
Yeah, essential that they do that. I suppose the thing to remember, this is certainly not the first disagreement that the Players Association and NZR have had before. I suppose the difference is just how publicly it's being played out at the moment. But we can't get away from the fact that the players and those that represent them are major stakeholders in this deal. And they will be now as their players and in the future as coaches and board members and club captains. So we do need to find a way to get them around the table, and maybe it's just with different people than we've currently got.
And that's the conversation you've had for a while, JK, on the show, is the fact about there seems to be just at the moment the players, the major players, and in regards to individuals, they can't seem to get across the line and get past that. But there has been more information come out tonight in regards to this relationship.
Yes, I think where I'm disappointed is that both sent out their Trojan horses. One, players talking about values and losing the values and selling the game out when we should be keeping it to New Zealand. NZR probably not telling us the strategy around what they're going to do with the money. Tonight there's been a letter that's just been made public to the chairman of Forsyth Bar, which is David Kirk, and the chairman of the NZRPA. So I'm disappointed the players didn't control Rob Nichol and he leaked it directly to the media, because I think if we're going to talk about values, one of ours is in the stomach and not in the back. So that's how bad the relationship is. On the other side, I think the New Zealand Rugby Union have been talking about what we're going to do with the money, and I think we need to be really transparent with the public now. Exactly. I've asked a couple of questions directly, because I've been asking around in the money, in the equity side, because people say to me, oh, if you sell your equity, you're never going to get it back. I asked this directly, what assurances can we have about this 12.5% not being sold off after 10 years? And I said, first rights to buy back are ours, right? So that's one of the answers. If it goes well, and when they say going well, it means that they want to take the 180 million that we earn per annum now to 400 and 450, which means that if they do go to sell it, we might be able to buy a percentage of it back, possibly not the whole lot. And the third thing is they have very tight control on who it gets sold to at the end of this Silver Lakes deal. So I got some answers around that. The other thing that I'm curious about is that it seems by this letter, and everyone can go and read it now that it's public, is that some of the stuff that we're talking about, the IPO, was shared with the NZRPA pre the steering group then deciding between Silver Lakes, CSC and that. So the trouble is that no one's going to win. No one's going to win this argument. We're just looking like fools around the world, right? So if you're Silver Lakes, why haven't you walked away? And it looks like they've said, we'll give you a chance to look at some other options. So someone has to get out of the negotiating room. And it sounds like it should be Rob Nichol and possibly the current chairman of the NZR, Brent Timpey, because it looks like they're clashing. Because it's not working. And we are just going through a whole lot of pain. So that's upsetting me, and I get really upset about it and passionate about it, as you know. This is not good for our game, and it is a critical time in our game. This is a turning point in our game.
And this is where, Mills, obviously high-profile former All Blacks have come out. Richie McCaw, who is obviously a good friend of Rob Nichol. Conrad Smith, though, learned a lawyer who came out on the weekend talking about it is time for this balanced discussion. But the reality is it going to be able to happen with this group of players? And I think we need to understand, I think New Zealand Rugby are looking at a couple of things significantly. Their ability to generate greater revenue offshore, but also to protect the grassroots game. This proposed option from the players doesn't necessarily deliver the same things that New Zealand Rugby are trying to. It doesn't tick all of those boxes. And is that where at the moment there is it seems to be, I suppose, the difference of opinion?
Possibly could well be. And I think, you know, it's good to know that they have got options, that there is an option. They're not just saying, don't go down Silver Lake, or here's another possibility that we can actually sit around the table and discuss. I think the biggest thing is, it comes out of this, regardless of, I know what you mean, JK, that we're looking like a little bit disjointed, well, really disjointed, is that both sides care about what's going to happen in terms of New Zealand Rugby and the whole game in itself. Now, when you get players coming out and this and this and that, I think what they've created is an actual little wee segments where, you know, they're fighting about this little thing, they're fighting about this little thing, and that's where I sit, because we don't actually have that information. I'll be really interested. That's the first time I've heard that tonight about, you know, what the answers that you've got, who's actually confirmed that, because I mean, we sit around here every week and we go, well, what's actually happened? And then someone, you know, gives you a call, and then the following week's a different story. And I think that's where they've got to come back. Isn't this what the 2 weeks was for, after the mediation, to go away and actually really just come back together by themselves, regardless? And I think you're right. I think it needs the two guys that are actually coming out need to step away and actually discuss what needs to happen and try and work it out in that way. Silver Lake aren't going away. They're not silly, because they know what this investment is. You know, the tradition that comes with it, which is perhaps why they haven't gone. So we're fortunate enough that they're still around, but they really need to try and do this, you know, outside the public arena.
Well, New Zealand Rugby, Han, are trying to invest in so many different levels. There are so many different parts to their organisation. The fact that they are trying to grow the game, they're trying to grow the role of the women's game in New Zealand, which is showing great growth. And you look at this, to me, what's important to you, and how do you feel a little bit about the fact that you're a former Black Fern, how do you feel about this being played out in the media rather than behind closed doors with people trying to find a solution?
Yeah, it doesn't sit that well, does it?
Doesn't sit well with me.
No, nor with JK, right? So, and you're right. And the difference, I suppose, between what Silver Lake typically invests in is that this is a national national teams and a community rugby and women's rugby, it's a bigger picture than just a professional body, which is a little bit easier to control and control the message. The fact that they're willing to have a look at all of those areas is really encouraging.
Emotions are high, though, at the moment, JK. How do we temper that? I mean, how do we get away from that? Because this is a unique situation, because we're talking about, this is not just a business. We're talking about dollars and cents and profitability and all those sorts of things. You're actually talking about, like the players have talked about, the legacy of our game, the rugby of the future, protecting our future. How do we get away from that and separate that in terms of understanding what's in the best interests of the whole going forward, remembering we have 150,000 registered rugby players in this country?
What we've got to realise is that we are a professional sport and we have to support the amateur game. So the professional game is actually in pretty good shape, right? But the amateur game is not. And we really need to be careful about bringing that money in and making sure that we stay strong in the pipeline. I got a little bit big-headed when I was a player once, and Kieran Crowley, who was my roommate, said, JK, no one's bigger than the game and no one is bigger than our brand, right? So it's actually the All Black brand that's bigger than all of us. All of us sitting here that have played for that, it made it. It made us. It made me. I'm sitting here because of the power of the All Blacks worldwide. I mean, you can go tomorrow. So it's actually, we need to get the egos out of this discussion, because it's not about any single person. I don't care if you're Bowden Barrett, Rob Nichol, you know, I don't care who you are, John Kerwin. This is about the future of our game. So we need to get around that table again.
So Mills, this investment going forward, does it need to support all parts of the game? The fact that from right from the very bottom, right across all of our provincial unions who have voted, remember, they have voted, they've gone and supported this deal. But let's think about it. They've obviously presented something different, the Players Association, but reality is, whatever comes in, does it need to go across the entire sport?
Of course it does, which is why it's such a big issue. The problem that we've got is that it's so broken down there that, you know, where do you actually start? Okay, it's all right saying that we've got a whole heap of money and we're going to throw it here to try and fix it, but how? Strategically, how are you actually going to fix it by just, you know, throwing money? Okay, well, you know, you get rid of debt, but then how does our game grow? You know, that's been our biggest issue. You're right. The professional side of it, we're outstanding. We're the top of the world. But how do you actually fix it? And that's where I sit. I think, well, we haven't actually implemented a plan of attack as to how that's going to happen. This is an NZR. And so when you look at it like that, it's just a whole heap of money coming in. And of course, you're going to pull on those sort of, you know, heartstrings. And we need money. The games. I mean, look at when we travelled, you know, around the clubs. How many clubs were there that were actually that turned out to break down on a Monday night, and it was packed? There was only one. And so you can't tell me that, you know, the club scene has changed. And so what is NZRU going to do to be able to change it? Is it too late to change? You know, can they come out now and say that? You know, because there's no use putting money across the whole game if it's not going to be fixable. And then you've got the other aspect as well. When you're looking at young kids, register. You know, where is that coming from? You've got mothers that don't want kids to play because of, you know, there's so many aspects in this that haven't been touched. And this is where the NZR and the Players Association need to go away and talk about it amongst themselves and trying to come to a solution and compromise. Where it gets former players, like for me last week when I said about the players are greedy, that's never been the case, and that's why it's sort of touched the nerve with a lot of the players that you know, I suppose in my generation, because it's never been about greed. We're traditional. We've always been a traditional team. When I've gone overseas, the best part of being in a team environment, which I've grown up from, is from the club rugby scene, where you've gone in there, you have a beer with your mate, you know, you talk about and discuss what's happened after the game. When you go overseas, everyone just goes out the door. And so we're real traditional in terms of our, you know, the back seat, how we do things, the firm. So when you hear someone come out and say that players are greedy, I don't think that that's the case at all.
And I support you on the fact that every player that I've spoken to, I honestly and truly believe that they do care about the game. They do care about the grassroots. They are getting closer to understanding every step they take about how important this decision is being made, and but they've got someone representing them at the moment, and I think it's really, really important that their voice as a collective group is heard and they have some sort of influence. We will see how it plays out. Ricky's avoided the conversation. You can give us the good news for some clubs and maybe not the good news for others.
Yeah, well, I mean,
this
is the thing though, isn't it? Like, how often are we talking about grassroots and clubs, and that's such a big part of this conversation, and what they're actually doing on the field. While this is all being played out in the court of public opinion, nothing's getting done, except for a swinging competition. Anyway, let's get to some good news, because we do want to highlight some of the best of the club game that we talked about so much, with just a selection of random results from club rugby around the country. We'll start in Auckland with the women's comp. College Rifles beat defending champions Ponsonby 27-7, and a huge congrats to Doris Taufatou on playing her 150th game. 150th game for Rifles, holy heck. Not such good news for JK's Marist, who lost 29-12 to the Students. Just really put them in a good mood now. In the King Country, Pine Trees Waititi lost 19-24 to Taumaranui in Nelson for the John Goodman Challenge Trophy. Rewaka beat Stoke 55-17. In the women's comp in the Garden City, Christchurch beat Varsity 24-12 to take the Challenge Shield off the Students there too. In Otago Country, West Haere beat Heriot by a point, 28-27. Also too, speaking of the next level of the game, the draws for the Bunnings NPC, the Farah Palmer Cup and the Heartland Championship will be out tomorrow. The 9-week FPC kicks off on July 16th. A good one too. Defending champions Canterbury will play Counties Manukau. The FPC is being split back into a Premiership and Championship this year. The NPC will start 3 weeks later, and a big game in the opening round too. Canterbury against Auckland at Eden Park, although who's going to be playing for Auckland, we'll still have to wait and see. The Logger Wood goes on the line first up against Otago. Hawke's Bay, with Hawke's Bay's home games also against Waikato, North Harbour, Bay of Plenty and Tasman. And importantly too, the Heartland Championship will return with the Lahore and the Meads Cups at stake. Great to see those competitions back after the COVID issues last year. And continuing our celebration of the club game and those who make it great, our local heroes segment. We remember, please send in your nominees to the breakdown at sky.co.nz. Well, this week he's a very familiar face, a great of the game, still a life member at Ponsonby. He puts the pads on the post, the corner flags on the sidelines. Here is the great All Black, Sir Brian Williams, who keeps on giving back.
Eyes on the ball, yeah. Look where you're passing. It's been an absolute love and a passion, Ponsonby Rugby Club. I first joined the club in 1960. I've often referred to it as my home away from home, except my wife said, no, it's not your home away from home, it's your home, and I go to her house for visits. Played for 15 or 16 seasons for the Premiers, coached them for about 10 years or so, and then of course I've been on the committee, I don't know how long. I was on the committee when I was playing.
He's an inspiration, isn't he, to everybody? Not only Māori and PI, but to everybody. I know, because I deal with a lot of parents, and they just, they're surprised when, they come down to the club and he's walking around, got a smile on his face and, introducing himself.
The beauty of New Zealand rugby and the strength of New Zealand rugby has been the participation, everyone, and the volunteer effort. People put their hand up, they want to help out. They coach and they manage and they cook in the kitchen and serve behind the bar and they clean up afterwards, and then you celebrate when you win, and when you lose you commiserate. And as your members get older, some pass on, and we celebrate their contribution to our club as well as their life. Yeah, so it's very special.
We've sort of said to him, he needs to take it easy, but hey, that just shows, the big character of the man. He's still happy on a Saturday morning to put out, walk around the field and put the flags out. And, we can't even get some of our younger members doing that, so.
Lots of people have given long service to the club, so lots of All Blacks, lots of championships, but also the focus on family, the focus on the grassroots, the focus on the kids, and just enjoyment. Like the Ioane boys, for example, they started at this club when they were just little nippers, and to see them grow, and I mean grow in all sorts of ways and become All Blacks. It's so satisfying, and so many families with many stories like that.
For me, watching him as a kid, getting to know him is his integrity and trust. So that's a real big part in terms of connections to people. So I think that's just what kind of the respect is that everyone has for him, because he's just the ability to kind of connect, and also, you know, just a genuine nice guy. He's kind of like our rugby kind of god as such.
Everybody's the same. He doesn't have any sort of, you know, you're up here and you're down there or whatever. So that's what I take away from him.
Professionalism has obviously changed the landscape for rugby big time, and as you know, we're talking about all these big money deals going on in the background. I just hope that the club game continues to grow and thrive, and hopefully some of the money can be channeled back into the clubs to run programs that are going to encourage lots of kids and other people to play the game. You learn so many things like hard work and teamwork and respect, and as you know, in a game of rugby you get knocked over, and the beauty of it is that you get up and you shake hands with your opponent. And then you go into the club rooms and you break bread and you share a drink. And those are great values, they really are.
Kia ora and welcome back to The Breakdown. Yes, the Pacifica Festival of Rugby, it has been announced, and we are going to see plenty of action for the All Blacks in 2021. The first three have been announced, and there they are. The All Blacks, they take on Tonga. The Māori All Blacks, they take on Samoa, and that is at Mount Smart Stadium on the 3rd of July. The All Blacks then play Fiji in back-to-back weeks down in Dunedin at Forsyth Bar Stadium, and then again in Hamilton. And of course, there's another match there, Tonga taking on Samoa. And JK wants to know why
is it at Mount Smart?
Well, I'll tell you what, a double header, a significant moment.
But if you play for Tonga or Samoa, where do you want to play? The All Blacks?
Eden Park.
Eden Park. So why aren't we playing at Eden Park?
I can't answer that question for you. So let's move on to the...
Is it because of the cost of the hot dogs and chips? They'll cost you $48 just for that.
Well, it'll be very interesting. I think there'll be great passion for those contests. But, Hannah, I want to talk to you about the fact that we are going to, on top of that, in all likelihood, given what happened last year, we're going to see another possible 6 test matches in New Zealand against South Africa, Argentina and the Wallabies. You think about this for Ian Foster. How critical is this set of 9 test matches, given what's coming in a couple of years' time?
Yeah, amazing opportunity, not only for test matches at home, but also to... potentially give some uncapped players some test match time through this period.
Do you expect to see that, given the fact... well, not that it would be comfortable, because we know Fiji can be very, very good and strong, but in Tonga in particular in that first test match?
Yeah, I think so. I think having a decent squad size so that you can roll in and roll out, I think would be great to see.
We've talked about it, Mills, the fact 25 test matches, maybe 30 now. They're pushing guys in, trying to find opportunities for young men to get chances. We've got players coming back to New Zealand from Japan. This is a complicated time for Ian Foster.
Oh, it certainly is, but they're going to blood some new blood there, JK. You'll be happy with that, eh, mate?
Look, I think that it's going to be a little bit of a mismatch, because we have had Super Rugby Aotearoa, we've had the Trans-Tasman Super Rugby, and Fiji and Tonga are coming off nothing. And that's unfair on them. I reckon we should have a one-off COVID special, and anyone that's not picked for the All Blacks from Tongan or Samoa descent should be allowed to be picked with no ramifications for that week, and let's make it a festival of rugby. Why did the Tongan community turn up to watch the Tongan Rugby League side? Because, you know, Jason Taumalolo turned down the Kiwis and came and played for Tonga, and then Tonga beat the All Blacks. So I think it's going to be a complete waste of time.
They didn't beat the All Blacks.
The Kiwis.
Yeah. They get confused.
Yeah, sorry. But what I'm saying is that let's just have a one-off and actually say, let's make this a festival like Moana Pacific's going to be next year. Make everyone who's from Tongan or Samoan descent available for their coaches to use if they so choose.
And I hope this is the start of something, though, going forward. We've talked about our support of the Pacific Island game. We've talked about Moana Pacifica in Super Rugby, but for test matches, this has got to be a good thing in some way for the islands.
Yeah, absolutely. This July test window, amazing opportunity for them to come here, and when the world opens up, for us to go there.
Would you like to see an opportunity for the Wallaroos as well to come across to Tasman?
I would love to see an opportunity for the Black Ferns to get some test matches, and hopefully that's the next test schedule that we get to see.
I hope so too, absolutely. We saw how much passion there is for the game when the Blues and Chiefs went at it earlier on this season. All right, ticket time. Remember, we have giveaway tickets each week to Super Rugby games. Hurricanes, Blues and Chiefs, they're at home this week. Email us at thebreakdown@sky.co.nz which game you would like to go to. A couple of our winners from last week, they bumped into All Black coach Ian Foster. Hopefully they gave their opinion on who they think should be in their team. I think there'll be a few Highlanders they'll get a run in there. Shouldn't forget as well, at Eden Park this weekend, the Sevens teams are in action before and after the game between the Blues and the Waratahs. A great festival to be a part of. Huge day there. We shouldn't forget as well, they're playing on Friday and Sunday. This is the only time you'll get the opportunity, Mills, to watch the Sevens players in action before they go to an Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, it was outstanding when they did it in Wellington as well at Sky Stadium. So just to see what their progression is before they go to the Olympics. So it'd be good to get along there and watch them go at it.
And simulating a tournament, JK, the fact that you're playing 2 games a day, 4 games across the 3 days to make sure they're well and truly prepared as best they can be. Yeah,
well, I remember, how much our sides were hurting after the last Olympics when we didn't come home with a medal for the men's and the women's came home and they wanted gold. So I think we need to do this to make sure they're ready to bring Olympic gold, which I think is important for the growth of the game, especially through Asia, because I think Sevens is that vehicle.
Well, Han, this is your welcome back show. The perfect time. We brought Mertz on. He took up half the show for you, made it nice and easy. It just shows you, though, there's a bit of a challenge with these two boys, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a bit of chat.
A lot of chat. I'll tell you what, it's been an interesting start to Super Rugby Trans-Tasman, JK. Are you as confident you're going to be smiling next week as you were?
Oh. Get used to seeing the Blues on the top, that's what I'm saying.
He wanted to start the show, finish the show, Mills. Everything was all about putting the table up on the big screen.
He's obviously worried it's not going to happen again next week.
It's all about the Highlanders, though, isn't it, Hannah?
Yeah, I'm back in the Highlanders.
You're back in the Highlanders?
Yep.
I'll tell you what, so am I. We know that. We'll talk about the tipping next week because I made no ground up whatsoever. Let's hope next week we've got many more positive things to talk about in the game. Don't forget, up next, All Access with Anton Leonard-Brown.
So us.
Marlon superstar.
Yeah, you're swapping, bro.
Actor.
Yeah, bro. Actor.
The Rock.
Go inside the 4 walls of the Chiefs' kingpin.
Did I ever think I was going to be in the spot I am now? Not in a million years.
From Monday
You brush your teeth this morning?
to game day.
Bring the energy. We just keep it on. We keep rolling. So we've got to flick the switch.
I want people to dream big.
Let's flick it now.
All Access. Anton Leonard-Brown. Premieres tonight. Sky Sport 1.